I should check YouTube today. Wonder when the last time I made a video was. Oh, here it is. Oh no!
Move closer to your world, my friend. Take a little bit of time.
Starting this new series, we start with a city that I definitely know best. For most of my life, I've lived in a railroad suburb outside of Philadelphia. Because of friends, doctor's visits, dates, jobs, and exploring, I spend a lot of time in the city of brotherly love. In this series of video, we'll review a city's transit network, talking a little bit about history, function, and what they could do to fix or expand their transit system. Today's video is about Philly, a city that with very diverse modes of transit, yet lacking in obvious places. Philly has a ton of history and is a great city to start with. Alright, I'm making a note here. This is later in post. I'm splitting up this series into probably 3 parts because this is becoming way longer than I thought it would. So this first video will just be about regional rail. Anyway, most of Philadelphia's transit is run by SEPTA, so you'll mainly be hearing about them in this video. I will be mentioning Amtrak and NJ Transit as they do connect into the city in different fashions. Also, I won't be going over much history in this video as there is a lot to tell. So I would recommend that you go and watch or listen to Do Not Eat's podcast called Well, There's Your Problem. They have an episode on SEPTA and basically the history surrounding it. They talk a lot about the creation of SEPTA with all the companies preceding it and the shortcomings that SEPTA had faced once it was created. But basically SEPTA has succumbed to many of the problems that other cities in the United States have faced. So there's a lot to talk about when it comes to Philly's regional map. There are many different services and multiple different modes of transit. Starting with Philadelphia's largest system, the regional rail. The regional rail system was once split up into 2 railroads, the Reading Lines and the Pennsylvania Railroad. Back in the day, these systems were actually completely separate from each other. It took until the late 70s and early 80s for this connection to actually be bridged. It was called the Center City Connector. A new station was built to replace the old Reading terminal. This is now known as Jefferson Station. It's a nice underground 4-track station. I just like the mural there, honestly. The regional rail has never reached its full potential. The original idea was to turn it into an S-Bahn-like system. Many of these systems are very popular in German cities. Many of these cities don't have a true metro, but they rely on their commuter rail system to act as a very frequent running metro system. Again, I don't want to get too much into this history, but it's basically screw up upon screw up in the late 80s and 90s with SEPTA and all the internal politics that caused this to happen. Just know that many of these problems are due to workers trying to get living wages and SEPTA and the politicians not agreeing to this. So in the end, lesson learned from this is listen to the unions and pay your workers. Our first item is addressing this monstrosity. SEPTA has to get their shit together and figure out their payment systems, because to the average person, it's way too complicated to have all these really odd payment systems for regional rail. Either use the card or don't use the card, SEPTA.
Intensive. I'll bet they won't have... Wow, they have it!
A working payment method.
Next fix we have is another small fix, which is to do with the S-Bahn system that I suggested earlier. SEPTA could adjust their schedules and how many trains they run and when they run them, and the lines that they run on, to be more like an S-Bahn system compared to the system that they have now. But I can't stress enough how important it is to have scheduling changes. To have a train arrive every hour on a line is not acceptable. You need to be able to walk into the station without knowing the schedule for the train and having one show up in the next 15 to 20 minutes, not every hour or half an hour. It has to be 15 to 20 minutes for regional rail. Running regional rail more frequently would be a staple of a transit-changing direction that SEPTA could take. This change alone could do more for SEPTA than any giant infrastructure project could ever do. Now we move on to large fixes. Large fixes are things that would require a substantial amount of funding, probably not only from SEPTA's level and county level, but from state and possibly federal level funding. Our first item on this list is to upgrade SEPTA's mainline track speeds. This can include a lot of different things. This can include upgrading the switches to be high-speed switches. This can include removing grade crossings and having either under or over crossing for roads. This also means double tracking single-tracked areas and banking curves to allow higher speeds. So our second item on the menu for large fixes is restoring and extending existing lines. So if you don't know, SEPTA used to have longer lines than they currently do. The problem is they only kept the electrified portions of these lines. The Reading line, or the current SEPTA line that goes to Norristown, used to go all the way to Reading, Pennsylvania, but it was cut short to Norristown because that was the only electrified portion. Majority of SEPTA's lines could actually be restored and or extended. Most of them, actually. The Norristown line can not only be restored to Reading, but could also have an extension to Lansdale. The Dolestown-Lansdale line could be extended all the way to Bethlehem or Allentown. The Warminster line could be extended all the way to Delaware, or New Hope, basically. The West Trenton line could also be extended farther into New Jersey. The Fox Chase line could be extended all the way to Newtown. And the last one is actually being worked on at the moment. The Media line is actually being extended all the way to Westchester, but currently it's only on its way to Wawa. And no, not this Wawa. I'm talking about this Wawa. It's going to be a new station, actually. Not technically a new station, but a replacement for an old one that was abandoned a long time ago. Out of SEPTA's future projects, this one is definitely one of the best ones to look forward to. The Westchester Railroad currently owns the line. They are an old heritage railroad that currently runs trains on it every so often. They have really cool Alcos and commuter cars that used to exist on PRR's network or the Reading's network. I hope that when SEPTA does take over the line eventually, I hope that they work with the Westchester Railroad and still run services of theirs once in a while. Another large fix that I'd like to see is to see SEPTA add completely new lines using existing infrastructure. A great example of this would be using the High Line, owned and operated by CSX. It runs through University City and down through South Philadelphia, all the way to the industrial part of South Philly, where the CSX rail yard is. SEPTA could easily implement some kind of shuttle or special train that runs in between 30th Street Station, where the High Line just runs above, and between the stadiums, which exist down by the CSX rail yard. In the picture I have on the screen, you can see the blue line is the suggested line. The orange boxes are where stations could possibly go. It's on Broad Street and could serve the Navy Yard along with the stadium. The second station suggestion is closer to Lincoln Financial Field and the Philly Stadium. This whole project could actually be done relatively easily and a relatively low cost. The hardest part would be building an extension to 30th Street that's an elevated station on the High Line. Other than upgrading the right-of-way and maintaining it, the hardest part about this project in general is that all of SEPTA's trains are electrified. Re-electrifying this section actually though wouldn't be that difficult, as many of the old catenary poles and structures still exist from when PRR used to use this area. Roughly 80% of the proposed route has structures for catenary wires in place. Many people also work in the shipyards in Philadelphia. If they wanted to extend the route, see my picture where the blue line ends at the stadiums and then there's a dotted line after, they could extend it to the shipyard in one of the places where they store cars currently. But again, our main focus is just getting people to the stadiums. I don't know, maybe we could call the train the Phillies Special?
Trey Burton who throws caught. Foles, touchdown.
Ayo, go Birds! But in seriousness, we'll talk about this section of elevated railway later when we talk about subways, or metros, or in Philadelphia, as we call the L. But now I'd like to do a category that I'd name in some way as my dream possibilities for Philadelphia's regional rail, aka the NUT Plan. Now, assuming in our NUT Plan we have ultimate funds to do whatever we want to change the system, in SEPTA's plan we are missing a huge part of the map, specifically the map on the other side of the Delaware River, this green thing, also known as New Jersey. Currently, there are only 2 lines that go into South Jersey. The red line, that's PATCO, and the bright yellow line, that's the Atlantic City line. For right now, we're only going to be talking about the Atlantic City line, again that very bright yellow line. The Atlantic City line is currently South Jersey's only commuter rail service. It's the only commuter rail that goes from Atlantic City through South Jersey and ends at 30th Street Station. The problem with the Atlantic City line is that it's actually better as an inner city line than a commuter line. When the Atlantic City line is in and around Philadelphia, its average speed is only around 25 to 30 miles an hour. Why is this speed such a big problem? Well, we can explain it with some maps. Here we have SEPTA's regional map again. The Atlantic City line is again highlighted in the bright yellow. You can see arrows pointing on the direction of when you commute into the city. So here's where the problem begins. The Atlantic City line has to go all the way around South Philly, Center City, and North Philadelphia, and not at a fast speed either. So not only do you have to double the distance you have to travel, but there's also a bunch of other things that get in your way. SEPTA's traffic, Amtrak's traffic, and merging onto the Northeast Corridor all slow down this process. So this is when you ask, how do you fix this? Well, you can't really fix this. I mean, you could make probably a flying junction or flyover where the tracks merge with the Northeast Corridor, but you're not really fixing the main problem. And this is why this is in the NUT category, because the fix to this is going to cost a lot of money. But before I tell you the solution, we have to talk about railroads in New Jersey and the history of New Jersey Transit. So the keen of you might be aware, looking at New Jersey Transit's map, the top of the map has a lot more lines than the bottom of the map. And one can question, why is that? Because New York City, it's a bigger city than Philadelphia, but it's not like Philly's a small city either. But this question can easily be answered by looking at one piece of infrastructure. Yep, that's right. The Hudson River Tunnel saved the entirety of NJ Transit's northern division. The Pennsylvania Railroad could foresee that ferries and a bridge crossing the Hudson River would not work. The tunnel made the need to exchange to a ferry unnecessary, and it also made it the fastest way to get into Manhattan from New Jersey. The Pennsylvania Railroad never built a tunnel into Philadelphia from Camden. Instead, they went with the cheaper option.
Hey, look, I made a bridge. It only took me like, 10 seconds? 11 tops.
Instead of a tunnel, the Pennsylvania Railroad decided to build the Delaware Bridge. This is the current bridge that the Atlantic City line uses and any freight traffic that travels between South Jersey and Philadelphia. The Delaware Bridge also connects with the Northeast Corridor at Frankford Junction. The Pennsylvania Railroad built the connection at Frankford Junction because it was way cheaper than building a connection through Philadelphia and Camden. But the downside about this is that you have to go around the entire city. Now, what's the downside to building a bridge way out of the way cheaply just to connect to the Northeast Corridor? Well, let's take a look at South Jersey's old passenger rail network. Yeah, that's right. We went from this, which is the original Pennsylvania Reading Shore Line network, to this, which is the current NJ Transit network. As you can see, the old network has a lot more stations than what we currently have, and a lot more lines that go to a bunch of different towns. Maps are great, but they often don't give you the human side of history. So much history disappeared in such a short amount of time when the South Jersey railroads folded. Getting between Philadelphia and these towns now is incredibly hard without owning a car, but relics of the past still exist. This is the original Glassboro station in 1954. And 1954 wasn't even like the peak of ridership for Glassboro. Unfortunately, this is the current Glassboro station. No passenger service, a freight train twice a day, and most of the station is missing. Luckily, the waiting area of the station was turned into a small museum for the town. So many stations like this one are the story of many of the places in South Jersey. Fortunately for Glassboro though, there is a plan to build a light rail down the right-of-way that currently exists, but only from Camden to Glassboro. And this light rail is great, and transit options are great, but honestly it's not that good for commuting into Philadelphia or out of Philadelphia, because you have to make a transfer onto the Patco speed line into Philadelphia. So in a perfect world, how do we fix this, and how do we fix all of the commuter rail lines that have disappeared from South Jersey? Well, the answer is a tunnel, and if that don't work, use more tunnel. So here's what things currently look like in Camden. The red line is Patco, the dark blue line is the River Line, and the light blue line is the SEPTA Center City Tunnel that we talked about in the first part of this video. The two things we really need to connect are the purple lines, which are the South Jersey Rail right-of-ways, and the SEPTA Regional Rail. And we have to make a tunnel that bridges across the two. So this is my proposition. This tunnel would start where the Ben Franklin Bridge entrance is, and tunnel all the way under the Delaware, under Patco, and into the SEPTA Regional Rail system. There's a lot to avoid here, but I think it could be done. This tunnel alone would allow for services in South Jersey to really prosper again. Not only would this make rail transit competitive to driving, but it would decrease traffic and be a great piece of infrastructure for the future of South Jersey and Philadelphia transit. Well, I know you guys like maps, so here's a map that could possibly be a best case scenario, or one of the best case scenarios for if a tunnel was built. Now with my crappy Photoshop skills, I made this map, which is all the rail right-of-ways that currently exist in South Jersey. This map is using all current rail right-of-ways that exist in South Jersey. So, tracks exist where these lines are drawn on the map, but the debatable thing is obviously what condition are those tracks in. Assuming something like this gets built, most of those tracks will be either redone or double tracked, or switches would be added and stations would be redone, so either way you'd need a lot of construction. Philadelphia and its metro area have really been lacking in certain places with transit. This is one of those plans that, in my opinion, would be game changer to not only Philadelphia, but a lot of the residents that live around it. So to finish off this video, let's recap all the things that Philadelphia needs to do to improve its commuter rail. Fix their payment systems, restore services and lines, make an S-Bahn system, upgrade tracks, run more trains, and work with NJ Transit to rebuild South Jersey Transit. Doing this would ensure Philadelphia has a fantastic commuter rail system. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. It was a long one. It only took a pandemic for me to actually finish my video. Make sure to subscribe, hit that bell, I think they're down there, hit the like button. I'm thinking of starting a Patreon to motivate me to do these videos. You should comment if I should. Otherwise, argue about trains and whatnot like you guys usually do down in the comments. Thank you anyway. I'll see you in the next video. I think it's going to be about Philadelphia again. And we'll see you again.